Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us for tonight's school board, Westerville School Board meeting. We have had some technical difficulties, so we are needing to restart the meeting. I apologize for that, but it is the year 2020. So we are going to begin again. Though providing an opportunity for public comments during school board meetings is not a requirement, the Westerville City School District, WCSD Board of Education, believes it is an important part of its engagement with and accountability to the community. In response to public gathering restrictions now in place due to the coronavirus, and in the spirit of maintaining an opportunity for our public to participate in these virtual school board meetings, we are offering interested persons an opportunity to submit written public comment. During a typical WCSD Board of Education meeting, there are two opportunities for individuals to address the board. While functioning under this virtual meeting environment, the opportunity to submit public comment will open when the meeting begins at approximately 6 p.m. or 6:30 and close shortly after each public comment section is reached on the agenda. When submitting your comments through the provided forms, we ask that you please keep your comments professional, avoid the use of inappropriate language, and refrain from identifying individuals by name in the event of a complaint. You may use the following links to submit written comments for the board's consideration, submit a comment regarding a specific agenda item, and/or submit a comment of a general nature. All comments submitted become a matter of public record and are subject to release under Ohio law and the Federal Freedom of Information Act. As with in-person public comments made during a traditional school board meeting, members reserve the right to respond immediately or withhold comment in order to conduct appropriate research and follow up with the speaker at a later time. Thank you in advance for your understanding and cooperation. And with that, Ms. Marshall, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Altman,
Here.
Mrs. Davidson,
Here.
Dr. Nestor Baker,
Here.
Mr. Bell,
Here.
Mr. Velardo.
Here. Thank you so much. If you are able, please stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you so much. Moving on to agenda item 4.01, temporarily suspending board policy PO 0169.1. Public participation in board meetings for this particular meeting. May I have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you very much. Any discussion? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Mr. Bell,
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson,
Yes.
Mrs. Altman,
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker,
Yes.
Mr. Velardo.
Yes, thank you very much. I have just received a text asking if there is a Zoom link. My understanding is, correct me if I'm wrong, that you will still watch the meeting on the YouTube site. We see it actually being played right now. So you will not need a link, but you will go to our YouTube site, and it will be broadcast there. It's kind of facilitated through YouTube on Zoom, if that makes sense. I hope that's helpful. Please continue to send us text if you are not able to get to that or hear sound. Thank you very much. Moving on, agenda item 5.01, approving the minutes of the Board of Education meeting held Monday, August 10, 2020. May I have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Thank you very much. Any question or comments? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Dr. Nestor Baker,
Yes.
Mr. Bell,
Yes.
Mrs. Altman,
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson,
Yes.
Mr. Velardo.
Yes, thank you very much. Before I go into agenda item 6.01, back to school report, Dr. Kellogg is going to share with us just everything that has been going on and some exciting plans, some things that are occurring. I still am getting some text that some people are having some difficulty. A couple have said that they've been like kicked off the meeting. I want you to know that that is not my doing. Vice President Bell may have something to do with that. I don't know. I'm sorry, shouldn't joke about that. Please do continue to text us. Let us know that you're able to get in, you can hear us, and so on. Just please give us a thumbs up or something, and we will try to adjust that. And really do appreciate all the people behind the scenes doing a lot of work trying to figure this out for us. And this is an important report. Dr. Kellogg, there's a lot of good things going on, and it's an unusual year. And just share with us again what is going on in this year. Thank you.
Thank you, President Villardo. Not much has changed in the 15 minutes that we're off air, so we'll start on over again. I appreciate everybody's patience. So let me start by acknowledging that this has clearly been the most stressful opening of school for our families you could ever possibly imagine, and we know that the timing of communication, families need to know about what's going on, our ability to manage all the information coming to us, cycle through that, put out clear communication to our families, make decisions that are in the best interest of the community, our students and our staff. I know a lot of that has created a lot of stress for people, and so we really do appreciate the patience and apologize for the inconveniences, and looking forward to days when we have kids back in school doing what we do best. So with that, I'm going to kind of walk through a couple elements of our plan and talk a little bit right now under a current state of the district and instructional model. I want to remind folks that when we made the decision a few weeks ago to move to a remote learning environment that we're in today, that we stated at that time we would remain so until at least October 5th. And the basis of that decision was we wanted to be sure that our health departments felt confident that we were having a long sustained period of positive data relative to COVID in the community and community spread, and then have time for families to transition from remote to blended. We also want to make sure that that runway of time was enough so that we felt secure that the path we were seeing, the pattern of data, was sustained for a long enough time period that we didn't fall into a trap of having to flip again back to remote after going to blended. I know we're not a college institution, but you can look around the country and see how some of the universities across the country have had to change course and the impact that's had on families. You can see the same thing about some K-12 school systems across the country that opened with in-person learning and experienced challenges and had to change their game plan. It just doesn't seem fair to our families to make the change too quickly and make a change that has to be revisited too soon in the future. So that's where the October 5th date comes from. We continue to talk to health departments. Franklin County has been our trouble spot as it relates to the data, both in terms of daily case rates and positivity rates, both which are trending in the right direction. We'll see what this week holds from this past week and where that puts us in terms of recommendations. But currently, Franklin County Health Department still advises school districts to start remotely. I know there are districts in the community, in the county, that have put out dates earlier than October 5th to go blended. I believe Dublin, September 21, which is about 2 weeks before us. Nick Hilliard just made a move that's somewhere in early to mid-September. I think New Albany delayed their opening till after Labor Day, and then are talking about blended. So, and there are others like us that are in a different place. So we'll continue to monitor and make decisions. Of course, we opened on with orientation on last Thursday and Friday. I had the principals send me their orientation communications that went out. Great information. Some of it contributed to us from the district about technology needs. Buildings took care of getting materials delivered to kids. Teachers did meetings with students that were live to introduce themselves. Principals put out information. Hopefully that got people kind of warmed up for this remote environment as we got ready for school, and we can work through any issues that they're having. As you know, last spring, one of the big issues for our families was multiple platforms of communication and multiple learning platforms. And early on, we made some changes to that. Schoology will be that classroom experience, that learning management system for communication from your teachers and where to go to locate that work. That's the best place for parents to go along the way. The other thing we put in place with these virtual success coaches, this is new territory for us. We've hired them, trained them, and they're working with the staff and the principals and the families at the buildings to provide support for kids while they're online, working remotely. Technology concerns, of course, is one of the areas they can work on, as well as providing them some guidance towards resources. So look to meet those people, families, as we move along too. We'll see how they can support you along the way. So a lot's happened in that space to get us ready for academics. And I want to say this, we're now in a place where I think if families are still experiencing difficulties with that classroom experience, not that I'm not interested, certainly receptive and will listen to anyone, but I think a great space is just like that regular year. If you're experiencing trouble in the classroom, difficulties with your child in the class, that teacher, that school counselor, that principal is your best resource for addressing those concerns. I will always remain available to talk with people and have my staff talk with people as well, particularly on those larger issues that impact the overall operations. But I want to continue to emphasize to families that this is a good point to start those interactions as well. Our teachers are working very hard to make this work for our students, and they will do everything they can to meet those student needs. So keep that in mind. We're a team. I don't think there's been any other time where the family to school connection ever was more important in public education. And we know that too much of a burden has been pushed on families at this point. We understand that. We want to partner with you as best we can to move forward. The other area I'll talk about real quickly is our virtual academy, Westerville Virtual Academy. We've made all the staffing for that, done teacher training and preparation, and that opens September 1. So that's a rundown of where we're at, how we got there, what the future might look like in general programming. I'm going to talk about some specialized programming across the district that people have had interest in. Start with special education. This represents about 12% of our population. Of course, students who fall into the category of special education may have an array of different disabilities that impact their school access, and all of them are important to us. Some of them make access to school more difficult in a remote environment than others. So we have started in-person instruction effective today with students in our preschool downstairs. This is our youngest special needs students, and with our students in our what we term our low incident programs, multiple disabilities, intellectual disability, autism. All of those children start today through a variety of schedules, in-person learning with teachers, and transportation and aides. Gertie Glass was out today visiting those classrooms, our director of special education, and reporting into us. Things seem to be going pretty well. For our other students that don't fall in those categories, we will continue to provide support for them both in a remote environment and WVA in the virtual academy. Students enrolled in the virtual academy are still connected to their home school. If they received special education services and other services through their home school, they will continue to get that through their home school. We don't want to break those relationships that are important to them in this time. So they'll get support in that virtual environment from those intervention specialists that they've worked with before, have relationships with, that are in the building where they work with, and with teachers that they work with. So look for them to provide support as well. And those staff, our special ed staff, have undergone a lot of professional development as well. In our gifted education program, another important program for families, students in grades 3 through 8 will continue to receive gifted services from their classroom teachers. They'll get support from our specialists. In grades 3 through 8, we have clustered students and students identified in like areas, and provide differentiation in those classes. In middle school, students in the blended learning model will be clustered together in advanced classes to match their area of identification. Our virtual academy middle school students are clustered in courses that match area of identification, and they'll get differentiation as necessary as well, and support in that Westerville Virtual Academy. Students in grades 2 through 8 will also have access to Schoology course created by our gifted specialist. This course will provide enrichment resources and activities for students, and will provide students periodic opportunities to participate in virtual meetings led by our specialists. And these students will be enrolled in the course automatically, and they're encouraged to access the course on a regular basis. So an additional resource online for those students in grades 3 through 8. In high school, of course, those students are typically enrolled in advanced placement, honors, and IB courses, and will provide support there. And the gifted department also encourages parents to sign up for our gifted education parent portal on Schoology. This is a resource hub and communication center for all of our families of gifted students, and will provide regular information, updates, and opportunities for those families and their students. Our English language learners also provide services. Again, this is about 9% of our population. And they'll get support from our specialists, whether it's direct instruction from their teacher through Schoology or Google Meets, or support through their classes, both through their paraprofessionals and their EL teachers. We'll continue to support them, provide them office hours, provide them assistance, answer their questions. They've been in very engaged population with us as we moved into this. So they continue to look for support there as well. Career Tech is another big program. We have about 260 students split between the Delaware Area Career Center and Columbus City Schools Career Center. Those students in Delaware will start in a blended format. They'll attend labs, their lab classes at Delaware every other day, with the exception of a few labs that will meet every day: cosmetology, fire service training, food service, and hospitality. They'll meet every day. Transportation routes should be up in Power School for those students who are attending Delaware. In Columbus Career Center, they'll begin remotely, and we're still waiting for some details. They actually don't open until September 8th. We'll continue to work with them and communicating with our students about timelines and information from them. Another important program we have is our Pathways programs. We have hundreds of students in our different Pathways programs. They've been collaborating together, those teachers, with Ann Baldwin's assistance. Our middle school engineering team has been meeting at the shop at North to develop videos and lessons. Our new computer science for innovators and makers, and those teachers have been working together to develop materials on Schoology for that brand new course. Our high school engineering and health teams have been reviewing the Project Lead the Way curriculum. They have new distance learning guideline documents, and working together, those teachers developing virtual alternatives for students to engage in while remote. The Institute of Engineering Design and the middle school engineering teams have sent home design challenge starter packs that include materials needed to complete several design challenges over the first 9 weeks. Students in upper level engineering courses, civil engineering, and computer science integrated manufacturing, we've given them the engineering laptops they need that run the software they need for those programs that can't run on a Chrome device. So a lot's been going on in there to shore up those curriculum to make them as close to a regular environment as possible. College Credit Plus, another popular program. We've seen an increase in students requesting College Credit Plus. They've completed the online electronic intent form. We'll get a more definitive numbers and enrollment as we get to September, and the colleges provide that information. Each college has been flexible with students adding courses, and Columbus State will allow students to enroll in courses until they begin on August 31st. Our embedded courses are still running at each of the high schools, and our instructors are working closely with Columbus State staff on implementing those courses remotely. Columbus State has continued to be a great partner throughout the closure, now remote. They've built on a remote model as well, and so they're supporting us, and that's been a great partnership. One of the big things we talked about in the spring was making sure our teachers were up to speed to teach in this remote environment. Couple of terminologies that are worth noting. When we refer to remote, remote means away from the building. It does not necessarily mean digital or on a computer device. It could be a project in a student's backyard that's remote. Virtual is basically means technology, and right now we're providing both. As you saw, the engineering teacher sending home those packets, that's not remote. That's not virtual, that's just remote. And so our teacher training was based on Schoology, that technology-based remote environment, the digital environment, tons of training on using Schoology, getting teachers up to speed, training for our virtual academy teachers on the APEX curriculum, the Calvert training curriculum as well. So we put a lot into that and have collected data, ensuring that all of our teachers have received baseline training and more in most cases to prepare them for this fall. So hopefully we're seeing improved instruction in that remote environment. In a lot of cases, anecdotally, what I've heard teachers say is that this switch over to this virtual remote environment has caused some of them to investigate the use of digital products more, and has actually kind of enhanced their toolbox of tools to use with kids that they can see value in, even in in-person learning. So we're growing as an organization and learning. Another area I'll talk about that gets a lot of attention right now is the social and emotional well-being of our students. And I agree with the case made about the impact, the negative impact being in remote can have on students' well-being. I think an equal argument, and I'm not trying to pick an argument, but I think an equal statement can be made regarding students coming back to school when COVID is an issue for them and how they feel at school and their safety in that environment. And frankly, I'll say that the experience we had last spring and all summer long has affected students' emotional well-being overall. And for us as a community of adults who take care of children, we all now have a chore in front of us, regardless of when we go to blend in and back in person. We have a generation of school-age children who have been impacted by COVID and other issues in our community that are going to need to be addressed moving forward. And we're committed to that. So we've had a lot of work on our student-focused piece. K-12 school counselors and social workers are design and have designed virtual offices. I have some examples I can share. These are awesome if you haven't seen one. I'd encourage you to go online. It's an image of an interactive image of their office. And you click on different parts of the office and there's resources available there. It is magnificently done, skillfully done, and it'll just make you smile, which is the whole point. So those resources are there. Sample drafts are available. The social emotional learning lessons continue to be a resource for our students, and we'll continue to work with we have populations of students that normally we provide services to during a regular school year that we know of and are still connecting with even in this remote. We also have some family-focused material, same as those virtual offices. You'll see on those, and there's some examples again of family resources on those offices, those virtual offices. And the student well-being website will be maintained. You'll see a lot of the resources we had last spring. They tell me future plans, student well-being office, beginning to plan for some virtual webinar based on mini parent prep, pandemic style, and SEL options in October and November. So they continue to focus on the student and the family, and importantly on staff. During WE Day, our Educator Day, Professional Development Day, they offered opportunities for teachers on strategies to embed in their classroom, on how to connect with students, and practicing those strategies to make those connections. We know those relationships are important. This is different than last spring. Last spring happened in March. The students, family, staff relationships were already built. We reshuffled the deck. All those relationships are new, and they're now having to be established remotely. So services and support are being provided there as well. And providing some material for our staff for self-help. So people are interested in that work. I direct you to our website to see what's available. food service, we continue to look at how we provide meals to our free and reduced lunch students. Just a heads up, and if I get this, don't get this completely correct, feel free to, if I don't get this completely right, feel free to correct me, but students have to opt into our food service program at this point. You have to have qualified under free and reduced lunch and then opt in for our meal plan. That's not us, that's other entities driving what we have to do. So we want to encourage people to reach out, take care of that. We will be providing those meals. And again, you can see information on our website about our food service office and how that's being done. The other area, and you'll be acting on the first draft tonight on our attendance policy, we're required to have an attendance policy for students during remote learning. And so we will be tracking student engagement during the remote portion right now in remote learning and in blended. That's a bit trickier. It doesn't work like in-class attendance. It's based on work completion, meeting teacher deadlines, showing engagement. So we will continue to track that and use that as data on student attendance moving forward. Each building is responsible for a student attendance team. They will be working with teachers to provide them information about students who they say are not engaging or on limited basis. And that attendance team will then take action to start to correct that, reach out to those families, figure out what's going on in the reporting piece. So we're trying to support our teachers so they can focus on instruction and not be overburdened with the attendance piece. We also have those virtual success coaches. That's part of their responsibility as well, to help us figure out who's not engaging during this remote learning and help report that out and making contact. We've put out a lot of information about our athletics and extracurricular programs. We know, I think we have a good idea where we are with that one in competition. I want to continue to remind people to maintain those mitigation strategies. If not, particularly when you're not in school, if you're not abiding by those mitigation strategies, if you're not wearing that mask, if you're not social distancing, if you're not washing your hands, if you're not protecting yourself, there's a good chance that program's going to be impacted by that behavior. We've seen that across the country. So I want people to consider that. And our families and students have been good about that. So we want to maintain those. The one we're getting work on now is on theater. There are new guidelines on theater. We want to talk to our theater directors and see what the best way to move forward is. I think the problem for us is if you look at our fall plays, typically that's a November time period, but you have to back up the deciding what show, casting, rehearsal. It just doesn't happen in a weekend. I know that. It takes weeks. And so we need to take a look at that timeline and make a best informed decision about what might be allowable at the time those plays would happen. So we're working on that with those theater directors who did such great work. So I think I've covered all the notes that I had. Again, students and families, community at large, thanks for your input, all the emails, the discussion. I know we're not always in the same mindset about where we should be. I do think that we all share the same common goal, which is to get our kids back in school at a reasonable time. I think the decision about what should be the trigger point, when this should be, that's oftentimes the point of friction. We hear you, we're listening, paying attention, we have the same goal, we'll keep moving on. And an opportunity to thank all of our staff across the board for the heavy lift they've taken on, the work they've done. They made the best of that additional time we provided them and are working hard to work under these conditions. And so many, many thanks to them for their input, their ideas, and their suggestions about how we can do this well. And we'll continue to listen and learn and continue to do, as I always say, work on getting better at getting better. We have not arrived. We're still on that journey together. So there is a lengthy update. Happy to take questions, comments, and thank goodness it got audio that time because no one wants to hear me do that again. Thanks for the time and the opportunity. Happy to answer any questions as best I can.
Thank you, Dr. Kellogg. Appreciate it a lot. I know, board, what would you like to share? What would you like to talk about? I know we have some thoughts on getting back in as soon as we can and all of that. I will just say how thankful I am that that's good news regarding special education. I believe some significant in-person learning for those folks that I think all of us would like to see served very well. I have a lot of thoughts. I want to turn to the board. Who would like to share? Ask question, thoughts.
Okay. I'll go first. Can you cover for us again? We are in right now. We are 100% virtual. Can you share with us how we arrived at October the 5th and what are some of the major decision points, some of the major things that we're looking at, criteria to determine when we'll make the shift, and how come we're waiting that long instead of pulling the trigger to go back sooner?
Sure. So a couple of weeks ago, when the Franklin County made the recommendation to open remotely, the data in the region was not going in the right direction. It was actually, if you recall, we were trending towards level 4 rather rapidly. And that caused a quick shift from Franklin County Health Department. City of Columbus is in conversations that I'm part of as well, although they're not our health department. Franklin County is and Delaware County is. So we were in a point as we were leading up to the start of school year to make a decision so families could plan. And so rather than waiting and waiting, we made a decision. And we also knew that our families would ask the next question, well, how long do you anticipate us doing this? And so we looked at our start of school calendar and mapped out several weeks of time that would include time for the data to look better at a point in which it was going in the wrong direction. And for families, once we made an announcement, nobody wants us to announce on Friday afternoon that starting Monday we're moving again. They want more runway to make those changes. Whether that's a week or 2 weeks or 3 days, that's all arguable, but we need to make those changes, and we need to make those changes in-house. So we built it upon that, and frankly haven't considered revisiting that at any point. What we've been looking at when we talk to Franklin County has been mostly daily case rates and positive test rates, both of which making better movement these last couple of weeks. And that may cause Franklin County to modify either the county coding or modify their recommendations. Certainly, if we move to level 2 in Franklin County, I would anticipate them making the recommendation that schools could move back blended. I will remind people that even in this remote environment, we've had staff that have tested positive and caused us to have to make decisions about quarantining and isolating. We've had students through our athletic programs that we're aware of that have experienced positive tests that have led to quarantines and isolations. And those have ripple effects. It's not just the individual person, it's the people who are in contact whose lives are impacted by that as well. So that's part of what we're looking at. So those have been the markers. Yes, there are ways the data can be sliced up differently and refined that have additional points to them, but that's where we're at now. Does that help?
Yes. Can you also share with us a little bit about how we arrived at the decision that we did regarding athletics? I think it's important for the public to hear that what we actually did was to align our policy with the orders along the way, beginning at the beginning of August, and then again here recently. What we did was align our practices to the orders that came from the Ohio Department of Health. So is that how we got to where we are as it relates to how we're doing athletics?
Correct. So the Ohio Department of Health, which governs the state, put out an order allowing for us to open up more for those sports to compete. And it is clearly difficult for me, I'll say, to align decisions around how we should approach teaching and learning, our core business, with how we're approaching athletics. And I'll acknowledge that. But I'll also say that athletics, unlike attendance at school, is not mandatory, is voluntary. Most of the sports we're talking about, with the exception of volleyball, occur outside. All of our guidelines for athletics include the same mitigation strategies. Of course, those when students compete or scrimmage, you lose those mitigation strategies during that actual piece. So we did align with those orders to give that opportunity for students. And it is difficult to completely reconcile that with the learning piece. But coming to school is required. And if we say we're going to open up and you have to come in under these conditions, we have a different policy decision around mandatory public education. I know people have made the case, well, they can opt for the virtual academy, but the virtual academy was intended to protect people from any changes back and forth between these. So I understand people's view of those decisions and their view on the consistency between those. And it's one of those parts, but that's where the decision came from, and that's what we align with. And hopefully people are wise and take that opportunity wisely and use it to their advantage. I've heard Lieutenant Governor Husted suggest that by allowing the athletes to compete, they're more likely to be consistent with mitigation strategies away from school because they don't want to impact their athletic team. I think there's a line of logic in there that could be offered, and we'll see.
Okay. One more. Could you also share with us your position, our position, as it relates to the Delaware County portion of our district and the Franklin County portion of our district? Since our district is located in two different counties, our position is we treat it as one. So how do we look at the data? Because the data looks better in Delaware County than Franklin County. What set of data are we looking at to make decisions for the entire district?
The driver there is that our schools are not we don't enroll students based on what county they're in. Our schools are not county specific. So our students are coming from Franklin County and Delaware County and mixing in all of our buildings and then going home. So from a community spread perspective, you bring in students from Franklin County who are a part of a county where the transmission rate is higher, and they're interacting with students from Delaware County, and that's the very causation to community spread, right? And so we don't have our students separated out by building and county. We mix them all together and don't separate them. So the virus won't look at someone and say, oh, that's right, you live in Delaware County, I'm supposed to leave you alone, I'm just down in Franklin County. It doesn't work that way. So because our students are mixed, their attendance areas are mixed, it doesn't make any sense to differentiate that way. We treat them as one. And we lean on the county whose data is causes the most concern.
Thank you.
Thank you. Who else has a comment or a question? Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
I'm going to talk a little bit about special ed and ask a couple questions. And I'm not sure you'll be able to answer all of them, and I'm okay with that. But if we could get the answers, because I do think people out there are hungry for some of these things. So I'm thinking about the kiddos that we brought back to school, and bravo for that happening. I am thrilled. So for our educators, do they have appropriate PPE? And if so, what does that look like? Because I know the kids, these amazing kids that are working with, it's a lot of hands-on, close contact that the teachers want to have.
Yes, we spent considerable time talking with those teachers and those staff and Miss Classes staff to make sure we purchased the appropriate PPE for those teachers in those specific programs. So it's my understanding that that's been provided to those teachers, and they should have what they need, much like you're seeing here tonight with our setup, right? The modified room with the not a shower curtain, but a clear plexiglass between our clear surface between us. So yes, we have invested in that PPE and providing that to those teachers.
Okay, so do you?
And I'm sorry, I should also say modified classroom spaces in order to enhance social distancing and put barriers up in place so we can do the things we need to do.
Okay, and are there still aides in there with the teachers working with the kiddos?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Um, I'm also thinking about fine motor and large motor. So if a child has some fine motor deficits, what items will they be working with to help with that? So I know having a child that had some of those had Play-Doh, some scrunchy things like things, tweezers to pick up. Are we giving supplies to parents?
I wouldn't have the answer to that one, but I'll find out for you and provide that in the board update on Friday. My knowing our staff, I'm going to hedge a bet and say that they are considerate of that and making sure students have materials, but I'll make sure that that's the case, particularly for related services, OT, PT, and
Yes.
some of those skills. Yeah, I'll check on that.
Okay. And then another thing, as we are talking about materials and supplies, I'm thinking about, you had mentioned engineering, I'm thinking about art classes. When kids came to pick up items, were they given items for those classes?
I'm pretty confident that there was stacks of materials beyond textbooks that teachers were providing students to prepare for what that teacher felt they needed. One of the things that came out in our discussion with teachers as we prepared for this was the need for them to be able to send non-digital material home
Correct.
for remote learning. And so a lot of that has been taken care of. We provide that opportunity for our teachers, and we'll continue to look at the logistics around back and forth on a schedule where we can deliver and return and deliver and return, as depending on how long remote lasts, or even in the blended environment as need be, though then it's easier for students to pick up.
So if someone has not received those materials, they just need to contact their school, their teacher, and those will be provided.
Yeah, particularly if they fail to pick something up that they know was provided, contact that school, that teacher, that principal, school counselor.
Okay.
So we can make arrangements with them.
Our English language learner kids, is there a planning to bring them back along with our special ed students? Can you talk of that?
We continue. So I think we kind of took the first tier phase of what students do we know are really going to struggle in this environment.
Right.
So we take baby steps, right? I think there's a next tier that needs to be looked at, both in terms of other special education students who might have specific needs from their IEP that's hard to do remotely, like PT and OT.
Mm-hmm.
And same thing with our English language learners. Depending on where they are on that tiered scale of English skills, we may need to start looking at bringing some of those who most need our direct services in at some point. We have not put a plan. We haven't uh, uh, developed a plan for that yet, but those conversations are happening as we step down this path.
Okay. Sorry, I'm reading my okay notes. Case managers. Can you talk a little bit about case managers as kids move from elementary to middle school and then that middle school to high school? I think that's foreign to some people.
Mm-hmm.
So can you explain the role of a case manager?
I would say the role of the case manager would be similar to any teacher who's bringing on new students. There's the transition between schools, which is more awkward and remote, but then every student is getting new teachers. So this whole orientation piece was designed to give teachers the opportunity to introduce themselves to the families and students. And that would include those case managers, intervention specialists that those students are working with to say, hey, welcome to the high school. I'll be your case manager here. This is what you need to do. Those should have all been part of that orientation experience. If someone didn't find that to be the case and they're still not sure what that is, again, that school counselor is a great contact for saying, hey, I'm a new ninth grader or I'm a new sixth grader. My kid transitioned up. Previously, they had these special needs. Haven't heard from anyone on this area. Can you help me out? And we'll make those connections, make sure those are happening.
So I would add to that a little bit. I would say that case manager is that connection with the child and the parent to each individual teacher at the school.
Correct.
And it's probably a lifeline for
Yeah.
them. So
Yeah, that's why we need them part of that team, knowing who the student is, what their schedule is, keeping an eye on that workload, making sure the accommodations are happening that need to happen. Absolutely.
yeah. I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Who else has some questions?
So we had said, and you referred to in your comments about the need to make sure that our families have notice before we shift from the remote model to the blended model so that they can make the necessary adjustments that they need to make within their family. And as we had talked about that, we had said that we wanted to provide a couple of weeks notice for our families. Is that still our plan?
I think it's important that there's a lead up to that change, because I don't think that people who are dealing with child care and work issues, that's going to be an easy switch. The impact on local child care facilities, as we've seen, they did, many of them restructured how they're doing things because of what we did. And if we don't provide enough heads up, it'll be messy again. So we had talked about a 2-week heads up. Hey, in 2 weeks we plan on going, and people can argue if that's too much time. I don't, I think a lot of people would like to see us go quicker than that. We can always modify that if we'd like to, but that was our thinking building into this.
Yes, I, for one, think that the 2-week time period is an appropriate time period given all of the things that have to change at so many levels and so many layers across the communities, as well as within a number of our families. Not all, but many. So I hope that we stick at least somewhat closely to that 2-week idea if we can do that. One of the things that has been raised, and I've seen a number of comments made about it and heard from a number of people and talked to people about it, is the idea that we should only focus our decision making on our particular zip codes and our particular student population. And I wanted to kind of say, hold up a little bit on that, because as we think about the people who flow into our schools on a daily basis, where our employees live, where our students go, shared custody arrangements, daycare situations, family visits, all of those things. It moves far beyond the zip codes that are contained within the Westerville City School District. So as we think about how we communicate and what we talk about that, I just wanted to kind of bring that up so that we don't get stuck in thinking that Westerville City Schools is a bubble, because there is so much interaction. Vaughn was talking about the counties, and you were talking about the counties, Dr. Kellogg, but it's not just the counties. It's how we look at our space within the metro area and how the metro area is impacting us. So you have been very prudent, I think, in your comments about when we should move and how we should watch and how we're monitoring and so forth. And we do need to do that. I bet we all want to move to blended as quickly as we can. This is where we want our kids to be. We want our kids to be in the buildings with the people that they need to see the faces of and understand the personal reactions that go with being in a society. But we can't jump too soon. And I appreciate some prudence on that, even as we feel a desire to make sure that we move as quickly as we can toward that. So I am not at this point saying, by gosh, if the numbers look good this weekend, I want us in the buildings next week. I don't think that that is fair to families. I don't think it's fair to employers. I don't think it's fair to daycare centers to move quite that quickly. But as we look at the changing data and we look at the metro area and we see the results that come to us because of, for example, Ohio State coming back in, into session and so forth, we'll be able to make a stronger move when it's time that will hopefully be able to keep us in a blended model rather than having to shift back and forth as often as could be. So that's something that's important to me. I wanted to read something. A teacher friend of mine, and I got permission to read this. Everybody had different experiences with the first day of school. And, we've heard some good things, we've heard some rough things, we've heard some glitches, we've heard some wows. But I thought this was worth sharing, so I'm going to read it to you. This first day of school is in the books. If you had asked me 40 plus years ago, when I first started teaching, if I ever thought I would be teaching and interacting with my students from a classroom with no students in it, I would have asked you what planet you were from and then seriously questioned your sanity. Fast forward to the first official day of the 2020-21 school year. I have spent 8.5 hours in my classroom all by myself, interacting with my brand new students via the internet. I had seating charts in front of me with all of their pictures in color so I could start putting faces with names, but it was so different from how I ever imagined it was going to be. Since August 10th, I have worked harder, redone more lesson plans, recorded and re-recorded more lesson videos, and totally changed directions on how I plan to do things more times than all of the previous 40 plus years combined. It's like being a beginning teacher all over again, something I thought I'd never have to ever be again in this lifetime. At the same time, this has been the shot in the arm that I needed to rejuvenate myself for the benefit of my students. I am very aware now that I have become comfortable with things going smoothly, changing little from year to year, and for the most part being predictable. This year is not going to be described with any of those adjectives. So here's to a new school year, new students, and a fresh beginning in more ways than one. Bring on this new adventure. I'm ready for it. I thought that just really summed up an awful lot, and it has a lot of layers to it. We're talking about a very, very experienced teacher with strong background and a strong sense of the profession and the movement she has made and the work she is putting in to make this an excellent school year for her students, and the energy that she is bringing to her job is something that I thought is worth sharing because it's indicative of so very many people right now. This is different and it's tough, and the decisions are still coming fast and furious every day. But there is much good happening as well. So I wanted to share that with you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Ms. Aldman.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm not telling you to
share? I was just asking.
Oh, of course I have a list.
Okay.
Thanks for sharing that, Dr. Nestor Baker. Yeah, so I wanted to start with a real nuts and bolts question, but I just wanted to check on whether we know what the food service enrollment numbers look like right now. I think the last time I saw, we had maybe less families signed up than we thought we would, but I would like to hear where we stand on that. So if you want to.
I don't have one off the top of my head. I think the last I heard was a little over 1,000. That'd be the last number I heard. I'd have to go back to food service. We'll put that in the Friday update for you guys. Tell you where we are with that one.
Yeah, thank you.
Continue to scour and get people enrolled.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you. And then this next one is maybe a little bit of a difficult question to answer. So I know, in this, like any year, we rely on teachers to really develop their own classrooms. And of course, there are standards, but no two teachers teaching the same thing teach the same way. But I'm just wondering, so if families are out there, because this is sort of a tough time to know what it should look like, right? Like, what is sort of like, if we can even say, and I don't know if Ms. Wallace or Mr. Reeves wants to help with this, but as families, I think part of the angst of this is like you don't have anything to benchmark against, right? Like, is my kid getting what they should be getting from their classroom teacher or their school? So I'm just wondering if there's anything we can say about the different levels, elementary, middle school classes, high school, that families should expect so they can sort of have a little bit of a benchmark in their minds. I realize it's a tough question to answer.
It is a tough question to answer.
Yeah.
But I don't know. My first thought is how much different. It's probably more transparent than in a regular year. Meaning, in a regular school year, you put your kid on the bus, drop them off at school, they go in the classroom, you don't see anything that's going in there until they bring home stuff for you to see. And so the measure of how they're doing becomes teacher reports, report cards, those things. So those things are still going to exist. I think the difference, more than anything, is that those classroom experiences are much more visible to parents because of the way it's being pushed on out of the classroom. And so I think that creates a different kind of interest level, more exposure to. But again, I think the best place to go, always the best place to go, is that family to teacher to student relationship that is so, so important. And it was important before, but I think it was not viewed the same way it is today. It's got a heightened component to it and a more visible component. But I would say continued conversation with the teacher that the kids are making progress. There will be assessments that come along the way, teacher-based assessments, state assessments, national assessments that will be used. A lot of the digital curriculum that's being used, particularly at the elementary level, has built-in components of telling you how much mastery a student has and providing feedback. In fact, if there's anything digital products probably offer more of than traditional classroom components is more breakdown of student performance and reported out to people than you normally would get in a regular year. So I think those components are in there, and I'd ask that question of the teacher. How will you communicate with me, or how can I understand how my students are performing in this class against the standards of the class and what you do? How are you going to communicate that with me? And I think they'll get what they need. And we're talking about what does that look like as a district to consider that same question. How are we performing in this remote environment? But frankly, it was the same question I had when we weren't in a remote environment. How do I know what happened in 1,000 classrooms each and every day? And I think that's where that relationship comes in, is ask those questions. And I think you'll find our teachers have good answers to those questions.
Okay, thank you for that. I think it's it's important to stress that relationship because, like I said, I think it is hard as a parent to just be able to gauge right now. And of course, for a day one, right? You can't. It's a little hard to tell anything on day one. But if we're next week, the week after, and our kid says, well, gosh, no, I haven't interacted with my teacher but once. Well, we need to make sure that kid isn't missing something, right? Or that, there's a technology glitch or the teacher's missing something. So we have to step into that space and make sure that happens. But that, I know that teachers are working hard to put videos up because some families' kids are sharing devices. So all the kids can't get on at the same time. But if they haven't, say, seen an opportunity to connect face-to-face with the teacher, probably something's being missed. Is that accurate?
Absolutely. We don't want lag. We don't want students trailing too long. If your gut instinct is this doesn't feel right now, then pursue it.
Yep.
I think, and this is part of, I think, this new family sense of burden is because it's so much more in their face, school every day. It's no longer just sit down to dinner, how was school today, get some feedback. Not that it's that easy, there's more that goes on the table, but I think it's much more visible now because it's right there in front of you and you're seeing it. And so that raises all kinds of questions for yourself as a parent. What is my kid experiencing? I wonder if this is the right thing. Did they miss on something? More so than just simply checking Power School every now and then used to do first. So in a whole nother level of heightened awareness about what's going on in classrooms. And I think that's a good thing. I think it's a good thing.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you. So yes, reach out, right, to your teachers and your buildings. So another question I have is about the potential return into buildings. And I'm wondering if we hear about this in the news, but if the health department has shared directly with you or with superintendents, what is the lag? We hear people talk about the lag. So, okay, Ohio State comes back, right? Or, a college or university comes back, or schools around us, or we go back to some in-person form. What's that lag where we'll sort of know, like, okay, we did that and we didn't have a spike in cases, and I realize you're not the health department. So, but I just wonder if they've talked about that with superintendents, what to look for, what sort of things.
Yeah, and I think there's contributing factors to the lag, which is, the reporting, and you'll see that they'll report cases based on when someone showed symptoms and when their case was reported. So they show that lag in their graphs. We know on anything this scale, it's not going to be immediate, right? There's always going to be time delay between someone saying I'm not feeling well and not getting reported, someone getting a test and the test being reported. So there's always going to be a bit of time delay in there. There are things to account for. Ohio State is a great example, right? Those students coming back on campus. So, for example, one of the things I understand, and I think I have this correct, is if a student shows up at Ohio State tomorrow and it tests positive, that reporting actually goes back to their county of residence because that's where they just left from. Now, 3, 4, 5 days down the line, that changes. And so this ability for the health department to share information, decipher it, clearly there's not a perfect reporting system built into this thing. It's probably shown fluctuations, modifications over time to make it better, to refine the data. And whether or not that contributes to seeing that things are better than we thought or worse than we thought is going to be part of what we see. There's an old saying about margin of error in data. It goes on both sides. So you can have over-reporting, but you may have under-reporting. So the question is, plus or minus how many points from the actual number being reported is the truth. And I think that's part of what we're dealing with. So it's a long answer to the question, but yeah, there's going to be those problems in the data.
Right. And I think, one of the things that I keep thinking about is people say things, and we say it all the time, like, well, the data is getting better. the thing is, it's not that the data exists out there, right? Like, oh, there's a curve and it exists. It's like, no, our behavior drives that curve, right? So it's not like we sit here and wait for it to get better for a certain number of weeks and then we're good. It's like, no, what we do actually changes it. So I know that sounds very simple, but it's something I've been noticing a lot, just in how, as a country, we've started talking about this situation and about the data. Our behavior drives that.
Well, there's probably a relationship between the state order on masks and some of what we've seen going on locally with our data and across the state, and people getting the point about the way they need to behave in order to make this work. And we know those mitigation strategies are effective. And if we have them in place, we'll be okay.
Okay, and then I promised last one. This is a more specific question about our plans. So if when, it will be a when, hopefully sooner, we return to hybrid, are we to the point yet where we've talked about whether that would be all levels going back to hybrid at once? Is there any conversation about some levels going back before others? We've talked about how we have certain populations of students who are already in the building today, but are we going to, K-12 going to move as a block, generally speaking?
I've had discussions mostly with myself on that question, and believe there's a case to be made for stair-stepping our approach. And I believe a case can be made for stair-stepping our approach that leads us to that October 5th date, as opposed to the October 5th date being the all-in date. Maybe that's the all-in date. Maybe that's the date in which we're finally all in. So how we want to talk about that, if we get that opportunity, building in time, would make some sense. Clearly, I would believe that K-5 is a high priority because we know that's the most difficult to manage at home because of the age of the student and piece. So I think if the board's interested in that kind of if the opportunity comes, how might we view a phase-in plan? Administration would be happy to pencil something together and start to talk to the board about what that might look like in anticipation of getting some better data or the opportunity to move to blended if that's something the board is interested in seeing.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Appreciate your answers to my long questions.
Oh, no problem. Enjoy the questions. These are great questions, so don't hesitate. I think if you're asking them, other people in the community are asking them, so I'm happy to do my best.
Thank you, Ms. Altman, for doing the two questions that I wanted to regale everybody with. No, I'm disappointed that Ms. Altman has the audacity to say that the actions we take are actually able to bend the curve. I've never heard such a thing as that before. Obviously being facetious. The curve doesn't bend on its own. Our actions are very important, and we've stressed that with the athletic conversation that we've had, and so far they are doing outstanding. That is awesome. And I wasn't teasing about the last one. The only question that I had, Dr. Kalaga's question concerned something. So October 5th, we're at August 24th. Really, that's a way down the pike, And all of us want to get the kids back in when it's safe and healthy and appropriate. I mean, we have 7 kids represented up here. And how many grandkids? Nancy has 12, I think, grandkids in the schools. No, she does. I'm kidding. I'm sorry. So we have a lot of personal desire about that as well. So thanks for the emails and the prodding. We're with you on that. I'm with you on that if you want to get them back in when it's healthy and appropriate. I do not want to see long-term impact on some young person's health because we rush this. I know that's not making a lot of you happy. I get it. So I think, Dr. Kellogg, I would dovetail on what Ms. Altman said, and I would say proactively, if you could look at as trends, and I'm speaking for me, but I think the board's kind of interested as well. But if the if the trends keep going well, if the numbers keep going well, et cetera, I think I would be interested in looking at a transitioning stair-stepping process, as we've done really already. Special education, English language, and looking at perhaps K-5, and could that be the first kind of tier, the first wave? I know that won't make the high school parents happy, but I think it's just honest saying that that's a harder piece for parents at home. I think we. So I don't know, board. Do you want to? Do you think that's a legitimate thing for us to look at, the possibility of stair stepping, or are you wanting all in K-12 all at once?
I'm just wondering what the purpose would be. Is that for spacing, or is it just to see how it would go?
I think I'm saying it to see how it would go, to make sure that we have the appropriate PPE, to make sure that, and I'm making the assumption of blended, so that you need to know that.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And a blended 5 and 5. I liked our 5 and 5 model personally. So I really, Tracy, haven't thought it any longer than if the trends continue to go well, could we go sooner? And I would not be really keen on a all-in K-5 in one day. So that's short answer is to see how it goes. Yes.
I might suggest on that one that the other thing about the younger children and a stair-stepped approach to some of this is getting them acclimated to how this is going to work at school. You do a lot of this is how we work at school with young students, and so even in our 50% on, 50% off alternating weeks model, that can probably be broken down to even smaller chunks to bring smaller groups of students in for the purposes of getting them used to the new way we do school, so we can get to the learning faster. That's part of the way I see that. A high school senior, mask and 6 feet and all that is logic. First grader walking in the building, this whole new, going to the bathroom, all of that comes with it, is part of how I view that, and not shocking the system and our staff who have to receive them and show them the ropes in this environment as a piece of that. I think that's where some of my self-talk about what would a transition plan look like and why. Where you put that, a start date, that's a whole nother piece.
Sure. I think I was just throwing it out there as a possibility idea. Yeah, go ahead, Trace.
So one of the things that keeps me awake at night is as we bring kids back into school, I think they are assuming it's going to be like it was the previous year. And it's not. It's going to be maybe your friends aren't there. Maybe you're sitting 6 feet away from whomever, and you're walking down the hall single file one direction. Those social interactions that kids are craving are not going to be there. That really, really worries me. So that part of my question was, are you thinking about that, getting them acclimated? And then in the back of my head, I'm thinking, well, elementary school, each school functions separately. I'm not sure, and bounce it back on me. I'm not sure we gain anything staggering the rest of the kids coming back. But I don't know. I guess
K-12, you mean?
So yes.
Gotcha.
So just because the schools are separate, we have them split up, team A, team B. I hadn't thought about that yet. I was worried about that other piece of kids coming back being shocked, and that worries me. So, thoughts? Anybody else? What else are we thinking here?
I think to piggyback, it makes me think about things like and I'm just throwing this out as one example. So if we brought some small number of kids back with K5, K3, whatever it needs to be, could their busing look different? Because I know a concern for some families is like how crowded are buses, right? Well, if we're not busing middle and high schoolers, could we spread those kids out on buses? And probably, probably not. But I'm just thinking through like where are the district-wide systems where is that not making sense?
No, I hear
Okay.
I hear exactly what you're talking about. I guess I'm waiting for Scott Dorn to chime in. I think they already have some of that
The
worked
routes
out.
are probably already
You're
determined.
approving them tonight.
Yeah. Okay.
But to that point,
Right. Sure. But
even if you said we're going to take a quarter,
mhm,
half of the half
mhm,
for this day, and that's all that's riding the bus, you now have shrunk the number of kids on the bus.
Right.
So by working on smaller cohorts to get used to, smaller than the 50%,
mhm,
to grow to 50%,
mhm.
I think can take care of that.
So that's my bad example of the kind of thing that I'm thinking through that, like as a board member, I can't really think about, but the staff can think through where are those places where some smaller number of students, we could keep them safer by doing things a little bit differently. And I don't know enough to think that through. So I guess that's the conversation I'd be interested in hearing.
Yeah.
Some of your
Yeah.
staff members,
Yeah, me
what
too.
they think.
Yeah, to think through the tiered thing. Does it make sense,
Right.
K5, K3, or no, we could do K12 if it's 5 and
Mhm.
something like that. I'm just looking at the October 5, and again, all of us are just really, I don't think we're overly cautious about this virus, but I think we're cautious about it. We keep citing Ohio State as an example. Yeah, but Ohio State has a lot of classes online. And Ohio State's, somebody told me football's not going to happen. I can't believe that. But so, big things are happening there. So we can't use that as an example. And plus, they have dorms. There's that whole thing. I think that's right. My initial kind of visceral is, well, maybe we just inch our way into it. But I think your conversations with staff really can be, how can we maybe potentially, how's that for a definitive thing? How can we maybe potentially stair step our way into a 5 and 5 blended if numbers continue to go well sooner than the October 5? If numbers continue to go well sooner than the October 5, and you slipped in a sentence, Dr. Kellogg, a few minutes ago that I thought, oh, that, okay. You said something, well, so maybe October 5, you just kind of said, well, so maybe October 5 becomes, that's when all of this stair stepping is finished and we're in. You're not saying that's what's going to happen. I'm just saying we're just throwing things out there, and I'm clearly using my hands again. I've been told several times not to do that when I'm on these calls.
And I have to just say, I hope Mr. Dorn didn't have a heart attack about bus routes. So I hope you're still with us, Mr. Dorn. Sorry if I caused one.
No,
Nancy, go ahead. You were going to say something.
No, I was just going to say, I think looking at a kind of an updated, revised version of Gentle Start, which is what we've always called the kindergarten start time, as we look at the different grades or different populations, however we want to look at that, is worth considering. But what I don't want is for anybody who watches this or who hears about it from somebody else to say, the board decided tonight that they're going to stair step the opening of the blended model.
Right.
Because that's not what we said. I think what I heard all of us say is, it's a good idea to look at. Take a look at it. Take a look at the ramifications for it. Take a look at the pros and the cons, both for the district and for families as well. And then we'll see where that goes. So at this point, it isn't a done deal. And there is still much to be determined as to how we will move into our blended model. It's not a question of if we will move into blended. How we do that is still in design.
Yeah, absolutely, Nancy. Good thing. How and when is still being figured out. Trace, you look like you want to say something.
Probably shouldn't say what I'm thinking. I'm just, can you hear me? Okay. Thinking about my concern was, and I hadn't thought about stair stepping before we came tonight, getting those kiddos in with learning differences that need a little extra, slowly stair stepping them in. So I hadn't thought about other kids. I guess, again, my question would be why we would do that. So I'm with Nancy. I think I want a little bit more information and hear what, Scott Dorn and his team think and staff thinks. So.
Yeah, that's just a good discussion to have, I think. I'm trying to think. I don't know that I had really kind of thought through the stair stepping ahead of time either. I think what brought it to my idea was talking through special ed in English language in. So, and I think all of us, Trace, would say, well, I don't speak, but kids that need more support need to get in sooner. Yeah. And I don't know, maybe I was just thinking the stair stepping thing, just kind of testing the system, making sure everything goes well. But I don't know that that's a legitimate reason to do it. So does that make sense, what we're kind of asking you to go back and bring to us and thoughts about? And Nancy, thank you for saying, yeah, we're not putting anything out there. Go ahead.
No, I do think as we watch other schools go back full-time, Big Walnut, we're going to see the issues they have and the problems they have, and hopefully we can learn from those also. So it's another thought out there.
Really good back to school report. Thank you. And I will echo just one piece of it. All of us are so thankful for the staff and what they have done, many of them through the summer in preparing for the fall. So if you are struggling at all, student, teacher, please reach out to teachers, principal, that building. Please do that. This is a team effort, and we recognize that this is different. And we are committed to making this as strong a school year as possible. So enough from me. Thank you. Thank you all for allowing me to share. Anything else? Thank you, Dr. Kellogg. Really good update. That was a report. We move on to agenda item 7.01, public comments pertaining to action items. You're going to address some things that have been sent into us now or at the second public comment. That's I thought. If you have any comments for action items, please feel free to send that link in, and we certainly will address those comments and get back to you. Moving on, agenda item 8.01, approving the financial report and investments for July 2020. May I have a motion and a second, please?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you very much, Ms. Marshall. The sound is on and you are up.
Thank you, President Velardo, members of the board. So this month we are going over the July 31st, 2020 month-end financials. July is the first month of fiscal year 21 that we're in. So our year-to-date receipts are $20.7 million. Our year-to-date expenditures are $18.5 million. And our unencumbered fund balance is $118.1 million, and that is for the district's general fund. For all funds, we had year-to-date receipts of $25.9 million, year-to-date expenditures of $24 million, and an unencumbered fund balance of $274.9 million. And that is all I have for that. Are there any questions?
Hearing none, please call the roll.
Mr. Bell?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson? Dr. Nesterbaker?
Yes.
Mr. Velarde.
Yes, thank you very much. Agenda item 8.02, permanent fiscal year 2021 annual appropriations. May I have a motion and a second to receive these?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you very much.
Sorry. Thank you, President Velarde, members of the board. So we have the permanent fiscal year 2021 appropriations. The board approved temporaries in June, and so this is our permanent appropriations that are due to the county auditor by the end of September. The changes here, we've added appropriations to the general fund. What I went over in the last board meeting was some of our updated COVID-19 related costs. So those are additions to the general fund. In addition to, we have several carryover added for some of our grant funds, and then we have some new grants. And also, I want to point out the workers' compensation fund. That is an accounting change that we're doing. We had previously accounted for our workers' compensation expenses out of a separate fund, and we are moving those into the general fund. That's all I have for that. Are there any questions?
You gave the report on the additional COVID costs. I'm just calling them COVID costs. The last board. Any change? Any significant change in what you presented to us last meeting?
Not really significant. The only change from the last meeting is the Coronavirus Relief Fund. So that's a new grant on here. You can see Fund 510. The $686,000. We received some new guidance on that about the timing of those expenditures. So because they have to be spent by December 31st, it can also only be for services up to December 31st. So initially we intended to pay for the Calvert and the Apex curriculum for Westerville Virtual Academy. But because we can only charge up to December, so we'll only pay for half of those, and the rest of the money will go towards PPE, which we have lots and lots of expenditures for PPE. So,
okay. Okay.
That's really the only change from
okay.
Yeah,
thank you. Thank you very much. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Just a quick question, since this is my first year doing this, and it's also a COVID year, so it's extra fun. When you look at like the difference between the temporary and the permanent, right? Do you find that they usually are pretty close, or this year they're obviously maybe a little bit different? Like, is this an unusual for the pattern, I guess?
That's a great question, Ms. Altman. So a lot of districts, I guess, do it different ways. Some treasurers will only put like 75% up for the temporary appropriations. The temporaries are really meant to just get the district started so that we can legally start expending funds on July the 1st. So we do those in June. And then once we get our certificate of total resources back from the county auditor, we're able to actually have the permanent appropriations put in place. So we generally here, we set the temporary appropriations for where we think the permanents will end up. And then we always know that we'll have some carryover grants that we don't want to appropriate until they're actually carried over and funded at the state level. So typically it's not that. The only changes that you'll see from temporaries to the appropriations here is the changes in the grants if we get new grants or changes in allocation or carryovers.
Thanks.
Great. Thank you very much. Any other questions, thoughts on that? Hearing none, please call the roll, Ms. Marshall.
Dr. Nesterbaker?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Ms. Davidson?
Yes.
Mr. Bell?
Yes.
Mr. Velarde?
Yes, thank you very much. Moving on, agenda item 9, personnel consent agenda 9.01 through 9.10. May I have a motion and a second, please?
So moved. Second.
Thank you very much. Dr. Hopkins, are you on the call and are you going to share with us?
Yes, I am. President Velardo, members of the board, Dr. Kellogg, I'd like to present.
Cannot hear you, Dr. Hopkins.
Oh. Are you able to hear me now?
I can't hear you. Can others hear him?
Turn up your volume.
Can you hear me, Mr. Velardo?
There.
I'm seeing some nods and some thumbs up, so I'm going to go ahead and begin and continue a little bit more. So I'd like to present for your consideration tonight's personnel consent agenda. We have 2 retirements on the agenda tonight from our classified team. Mr. Robert Payne, who is most recently a study hall monitor at Blendon Middle School. He's retiring after 13 years of service to Westerville City Schools. We also have Teresa, or better known as Terry Cornell, who is most recently a clerk at Faust Elementary School. And she has provided Westerville City School with 27 years of service to our community. So we wish them the absolute best as they enter the retirement, and certainly thank them for their many years of service to our community. We have 16 classified resignations this evening. There's also a one-time pay to support professional learning for our educators at Westerville Virtual Academy. We also have the recommendation for the employment of individuals to a number of classified positions. As Dr. Kellogg referenced earlier, many of them are the success coach positions, which we're excited to have join our district. A new educator, as well as a number of individuals to various pupil activity programs. So I'm happy to answer any questions you may have at this time.
Will you name the 2 that are retiring again, Dr. Hopkins?
Sure. It's Mr. Robert Payne, study hall monitor from Blendon Middle School, and Miss Terry Cornell, clerk at Faust Elementary School.
At Faust Elementary School. Thank you very much. I thought I heard you say at South Elementary School. And I thought, wow, we built that school on the south end very quickly. Thank you, Dr. Hopkins. Any questions or comments? Hearing none. Thank you, Dr. Hopkins. Would you please call the roll?
Ms. Davidson,
Yes.
Mrs. Altman,
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker,
Yes.
Mr. Bell,
Yes.
Mr. Velardo.
Yes, thank you very much. Moving on, agenda item 10.01, final reading, policy 2464, gifted education and identification. This is a final reading, so you've had a chance to go over it with a fine-tooth comb. Anybody have any questions or comments? Hearing none. Didn't I do a motion? May I have a, thank you for pointing that out publicly. May I have a motion? May I have a motion and a second, please?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you very much. Now, any questions, comments? Hearing none, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Bell,
Yes.
Mrs. Altman,
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson,
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker,
Yes.
Mr. Velardo.
Yes, thank you very much. Moving on, agenda item 11, new business 11.01, first reading, policy 2262, non-discrimination on the basis of sex in education programs and activities. Again, new policy. And Dr. Hopkins or Dr. Nestor Baker working on policy for the board. Do either one of you would like to share anything?
If it's okay, Dr. Nestor Baker, I can go ahead and begin. Thank you.
I think she's calling on you, Dr. Hopkins.
President Velardo, members of the board, Dr. Kellogg. This is a revision to the existing board policy, which more clearly outlines the training and some of the procedural requirements related to this topic, quite often referred to as Title IX. The policy stipulates the mandates required to be following when we address, investigate, and adjudicate allegations of sexual harassment occurring in the district's education program. I'd like to also note that the district has already identified individuals who will be serving in many of these investigatory positions, and they have undergone significant training over the summer. We've also posted information about some of these processes on our district's website. It's recommended that these revisions reflect current law and should be adopted to maintain accurate policies.
Thank you, Dr. Hopkins. Yes, ma'am. Go ahead. Yes.
So I will add a couple of things to that. You may have noticed that we already have an anti-harassment policy that repeats itself several times through our policies. And I wanted to point out that this particular policy complements and expands on the existing language that we have in those policies. This deals more specifically with processes and procedures, particularly as related to Title IX. And I also wanted to point out that with this policy will be a set of administrative guidelines that spell out, as Dr. Hopkins said, with great specificity, the processes that actually need to be followed around this particular policy. So this is part and parcel of the body of work that we have in our policies and our guidelines around harassment.
Thank you, Dr. Nestor Baker. Obviously a very important policy, and we will take a close look at it. This is just first reading, so no need for action. Any questions, however, for Dr. Hopkins or for Dr. Nestor Baker at this point? Thank you very much. Hearing none. Thank you, Dr. Hopkins. Moving on, agenda item 11.02, a first reading policy 5200. This is a policy regarding attendance. Dr. Kellogg, you mentioned this earlier. Ms. Meisner, are you on the call and would like to share with us a little bit about this?
I am on the call. Good evening, Mr. Velardo and members of the board. I'm sharing with you today revisions that we're offering for you to consider regarding our policy 5200, our attendance policy. This policy has been revised numerous times in the last few years, and tonight is hopefully the beginning of yet another revision to occur. Today, we are recommending revisions to include examples of what it means to be medically excused for students to miss school. This is important because medically excused reasons are no longer considered in a formula for calculating excessive absenteeism. This policy also contains guidance for tracking student attendance during remote instruction. As indicated in the offered revisions, there are a variety of ways that student attendance may be tracked, including monitoring student logins, students submitting completed assignments, and other forms of measuring student engagement. I'm happy to try to answer any questions you might have about these revisions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Meisner. Anyone have any questions at this point?
If I could just ask, it's not really a question, but I just want to make sure I'm understanding, having read through this, that most of these changes are driven by the fact that we need to look at attendance differently than we have in the past. Right? Where previously it was like a kid walked through a door, they sat in a chair, someone said they were in the chair, they're at school, right? And that is all very different right now. And related to that is, because I know if parents have asked questions like, well, what if my child gets COVID-19 and they can't be in school, or someone in my family does and my child needs to quarantine, right? So just maybe a statement, Ms. Meisner, on, am I correct in that that's what's driving most of these changes?
I think that you exactly pinpoint to the fact that, previously attendance was probably solely defined by minutes of students and seats in classrooms. And so we've had to look at this a little bit differently.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Meisner. Anyone have any other questions at this point? Hearing none. Thank you very much, Ms. Meisner. Moving on to agenda item 12.01, resolution number. Okay. I was just paused there for dramatic effect. Resolution approving designated bus routes and bus stop locations for the FY21 school year. May I have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Snyder, are you on the call? You want to share with us tonight?
Yes, thank you, President Velardo, members of the board. Before you this evening is a resolution approving the designated bus and van routes and bus and van stop locations for the upcoming school year, for this school year. Ohio Administrative Code 3301-8313 requires annual district board approval of all bus routes, van stops, and time schedules. This requirement must be accomplished within the first 10 days of the start of school. The state requires transportation for students in grades K through 8 who reside greater than 2 miles from their school of attendance, their home school. Westerville's service parameters continue to exceed the state minimum requirements by providing not only transportation to students in grades K through 8, but also students in 9th and 10th grades. And we also transport students in the 11th and 12th grades based on space available basis. Westerville City Schools has also been providing now in our 3rd year van service through the My Van program for special education students in grades K through 12. For the last school year, this past school year ending, we ended the school year with 101 school bus routes to 34 locations, including 24 public schools, 6 private schools, 1 charter school, and 3 career centers. And we ended the year last year with 20 My Van routes. This year, we will begin the school year with 101 bus routes to 34 locations, same number, 24 public schools, 6 private schools, 1 charter school, and 3 career centers. And we will start this year with 19 My Van routes. We do plan for student bus stop information to be available in Power School at least 1 week prior to the return of students to in-person instruction. This time, I'd be happy to answer any questions in regards to this resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Snyder. Anyone have any questions?
I always have a question. I like to understand what goes behind this. So if you don't mind me asking, Mr. Snyder.
We're always glad when you ask questions.
So, Mr. Snyder, could you talk a little bit about just the process of getting these routes and these bus stop locations put together so people can understand, you know, and I'm still learning about how much work goes into this. And then also, I've always wondered, I've never been in a position to ask, so I guess I'll do it now. Why, you know, this is something the board needs to approve, and my assumption is that's because, you know, there are legal requirements for transport, and we are sort of certifying that these routes meet those requirements, but that there could be some other reason. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on those.
In regards to the board needing to approve the bus routes, that is a state law, that is a state requirement that has been in effect for many years. Where a school board needs to approve those routes. And in particular, it also, state law provides that the superintendent or their designee throughout the year can adjust and make modifications to those bus routes. We actually begin the routing process for the new school year in the latter part of the previous school year by basically loading our routing software with next year's student placements. So 4th graders going to 5th, but also 5th going to 6th in their new buildings, et cetera. And then throughout the summer, we're adjusting routes based on enrollment trends. We're adjusting routes on, we may see a large group of, let's just say 5th graders that have moved through the pipeline now going to 6th. Therefore, now we have a large group of 6th graders in the middle schools going through. And we work through the summer in making, again, those adjustments, adjusting stop locations up to a 1/4 mile from the student's home. And that process goes throughout the summer until we are ready to post the routes where the drivers select their routes, and then we start making that information available to the public through Power School.
Great, thank you. I think it's helpful just for people to have a glimpse of how long this takes. This is not something that's done overnight. So I mean, you know, we've all said it before, but I really appreciate all the work that goes into putting these routes together and making sure that we're ready to get the kids safely to school when they can go back into their buildings.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Altman. And thank you, Mr. Snyder. Really appreciate the information. Moving on to what? I was starting to say, moving on to vote. I would ask Ms. Marshall to call the roll.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mr. Bell?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Dr. Nestabaker?
Yes.
Mr. Velardo?
Yes, thank you very much. Moving on to agenda item 13, public comments. We have had the portal for public comments open, and we have aggregated some of those together. Dr. Kellogg, would you like to begin and share some of what's been brought in, and the board members can chime in as well?
Thank you, President Velardo, members of the board. Yeah, so Through the public comment portal, we actually had 4 emails that came in, 2 of them from one person, so 3 people, 4 emails. These will be posted on our website so people can see who presented them, what the actual content was. One of them, I'm going to start with this one, was a thank you for opening up sports, so we appreciate that. We know a lot of people are excited about that. Two of the others involved discussions about their thoughts on moving to blended and the data in the county and how they viewed that. I think we gave that adequate discussion this evening when we talked about back to school and what's driving our decisions. So I'll allow that to kind of serve as the response. The fourth one was actually from a parent who had a concern about their child who's in the at one of our elementary schools who's in the virtual academy and their timeline of that decision. I actually have a phone call with that family tomorrow to talk to them about their concerns, seeing what we can do. I think there's a misunderstanding. So those were the emails. I said one was a thank you on the athletics, 2 of them on perspectives on the opening. I think we covered this evening, and the other one is one I'm taking care of tomorrow. I'm going to talk to that family. The other thing I want to share with the board is I did have a document dropped off to me today that states says title Westerville wants a choice to have kids back in school. To the board and superintendent, we are being told by pediatricians that children need to be in school. We are being told by medical professionals that we have a robust protective system in place and they are confident with children going back to school and taking school provided transportation. We're being told by educators that children will not receive the same quality of education as if they were in the classroom. And given all this, children are still being forced into remote learning. We're asking families to have a choice to put their children back in the schools to learn. Why is this important? The overall health and well-being of the children in our community is being negatively impacted. We should have a choice if we want our children to be in school. There's 309 names on here, not signatures, with zip codes, nothing verifiable, not saying anything about the adequacy of the petition. It's not clear about what they mean by back in school and choice, whether or not they mean bring everybody back and people can choose to. My sense is, having talked to some of these individuals through emails and conversation before, this is a call for us to move faster on the blended learning. Large conversation about that this evening is how I interpret it. If not, then some clarity might be about what they mean by choice coming back and what we're looking at. So I wanted to share that was dropped off. I want to acknowledge that through the public comments that was the case. I think we talked about this issue and where we are with it this evening, but I wanted to share that came in as well. So that covers pretty much the public comment section.
Thank you, Dr. Kellogg. Anyone want to respond to any of those public comments in particular? I mean, it's just curious. Just want to let you, if you need to, want to, desire to. Okay, because we're going to go into, thank you, Dr. Kellogg. We're going to go into board comments at this time. Anyway, so who would like to share some board comments thoughts? Should we go alphabetical? If we go alphabetical, I always will call Miss Altman first. I know, but I know you want to share. So I'm.
When I married, I moved from a B to an A. Have I said that before? Like, anyway.
You didn't move very far.
I didn't move very far. No.
All right, Miss Altman.
So just a couple of things. I want to thank everybody, who's worked so hard to get kids back and learning today. Just a tiny little anecdote from my own house is that my 5th grader had she was so excited. She was in her chair, I think at about 8:15. And then after school was over, she was doing a yoga video that her phys ed teacher had put on her virtual classroom. So anyway, so very good experience for the 5th grader. Now the senior had to be, no, she was fine too. And my child who's doing the virtual academy has not yet started. So I want to thank all the teachers and staff. I know a ton of work has gone into that and it will continue to evolve. A couple of things related to, so our retirees, Mr. Payne and Ms. Cornell, my family has actually had an opportunity to interact with or know both of these people. So they're just have have done such service to this district, and I want to thank them both for just being wonderful. So thank you, and we wish you all the best in retirement. And then I want to return to a conversation that we had a few weeks ago. So we've had some great conversations around equity, and I remember we had, so I guess if I walk sort of through the timeline, as a board, we had a resolution reaffirming our values as a district that included language around equity. We had Ms. DeVise's presentation, she and her team, on the equity teams, and that's a positive development, looking at those, how those teams can help increase equity across the district. And so another piece of that equity conversation is the School Resource Officer Program that we've talked about before and had a presentation on before. And so I just wanted to, been thinking a lot about that, equity in the broad sense, but particularly that School Resource Officer Program. And I would just put forward tonight that that's been on my mind, and I would like to ask us to return to that conversation. I'd like to ask us to talk about evaluating that program. In particular, you know, I would like to have a conversation about bringing an external evaluator in to help us look at that program. In my professional life, I am both trained as a hard scientist and a social scientist. So data-driven is what makes sense to me. I work with program evaluators in my day job, and with a defined sort of bounded program like that, I'm just really interested in us returning to the conversation about having some outside assistance to look at the program. And I will say, as a social scientist, I just feel the need to say that I have no predetermined outcome in that. I am a data-driven person, and that's where this request comes from. So I think, Dr. Kellogg, you know, you said a couple times earlier today, and I've heard you say before, we got to work on getting better at getting better. And to me, that's just, this is part of that. So yeah, just wanted to put that out there, that I'd appreciate coming back around to talk about school resource officers and evaluating that program sooner rather than later, and would appreciate, I guess, if any other board members, you know, want to make a comment on that. I welcome sort of knowing whether other folks are interested in that conversation too.
Thank you, Ms. Altman. Appreciate it. Who would like to go next? B. Oh, that's right. B. Bell. Thank you. Sorry, she threw you under the bus, not me.
Pressure on the alphabet. I'll make my comments brief. I just want to thank all of the administration and the staff for all of the hard work that you have put into making this very unusual school year possible. And so thank you for all of that. Thank you for being flexible in rolling and going with the flow. Understand that you know, the way that we're in the midst of a season of almost continual and constant change. So thank you for your flexibility in helping to educate our children all across the district. Congratulations to our two retirees. Thank them so much for your dedicated service to the school district. We appreciate you more than words can express. As it relates to the issue of the school resource officers, I do believe that is a conversation that I would like for us to continue to have conversation on. I have been having conversations, spoken with some of you about it. And so, yes, look forward to it being a part of the larger equity work that we are doing through the district with our the introduction of our equity teams. So looking forward to continuing that work.
Thank you, Reverend Bell with a B. And I believe we go to Davidson with a D.
D. Yep. So I'll be brief also. Sincere thank you to our families and our staff. I know these have been crazy, trying times. Please bear with us. I know there's still going to be bumps in the road, but I can tell you from the bottom of my heart that this district and these teachers and this staff love your kiddos, and they're in it for the long haul. So please just be patient. The SRO conversation, I am very interested in continuing that sooner than later. So if we could talk about maybe putting that on an agenda soon, I would appreciate that. So, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Davidson. Dr. Nestor Baker.
Yes, we are all saying thank you. And it is very important to tell all of the people who are involved with this school district, whether you work here or whether your children attend here or whether you're part of the community that owns this school district, we thank you for your flexibility, as has been said, for your passion about this school system. It says a lot, even when we may not necessarily agree on some decisions that we each make. Still, there is a great deal of care and passion about education and about the way it's delivered here, where we all are together in this school system. So I am very thankful to be part of this with all of you as we step into this new school year. It is unlike anything, and we've all said that before and will continue to say it, but I have every confidence that even though it is unlike anything, that will in the end turn out to be a strength for us, because we will get better at getting better, and what we learn during this tough year will carry into the future. So there's a lot yet to do, and we have lots of decisions to make, but we are moving in a good direction with really good people helping to steer the work on the staff and teacher side. So I'm grateful to everyone. As regards to the SROs, I think we have said that evaluation is fine, and it is. All of our programs should be evaluated. We have policy language around the evaluation of programs, educational programs, schools, etc., and how that is to be carried out. And I have no problem at all with discussing that. I have very strong feelings about our SRO program and its place in our district, and I welcome the opportunity to talk about that again. I want to end my comments by thanking Terry and Mr. Payne. As always with our retirees, it's how do you say thank you for everything that you've done and everything that you've given. I especially want to thank Terry. Terry and I actually went to high school together. Yep, I know. She's retiring and I'm not. Deal with it. So Terry and I have known each other a long time. She actually babysat my daughter Kaylee when Kaylee was 3 years old so that I could go take voice lessons because Kaylee didn't think that was a good plan. And wouldn't go with me willingly. So Terry babysat my daughter. Terry and I have known each other since we were teens. We went to the same church together, and she proved to be such an incredible strength for this district in her work at Faust and all of her relationships that she's had over the years with all the students and families and teachers and staff members. Thanks, Terry. I appreciate you.
Awesome. Thank you, Nancy. Just a couple of quick thoughts. First, Westerville is very blessed to have an organization called the Westerville Partnership. The Westerville Partnership is comprised of 4 organizations in Westerville, and they work together to try and respond to community need. Westerville City Government, Otterbein University, Westerville Library, the Westerville City School District, and the Chamber of Commerce. Thank you very much. really good organizations, and I would say, and when they are challenged, they try to respond to what the community is saying. The reason I'm highlighting the partnership is there is a very special program to be live streamed April 28th, 11:30 to 1 o'clock, right? Oh, I'm sorry. Didn't I say August? I say April? August 20. Really, we're going to have to do this whole meeting again because the sound has been off. August 28th, 11:30 to 1 o'clock, live streamed, and it is entitled, Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community? The beginning of this program, I would encourage you to listen to all of it, be a participant in all of it, but will be a replaying of Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech. That is the reason the date, August 28th, has been chosen. It's 17 minutes, and my guess is too many of us have not listened to the whole speech. So I would encourage you to do that. And then the point being, all 5 of those organizations will make a presentation, will talk about their current equity work. So we in the school district are going to be talking about kind of reflecting on some of parts of Dr. King's speech. And here is how we are trying to make a more equitable, a more just, a more, if I may, beloved community school district. So that is August 28th, 11:30 to 1 o'clock. Remind me how they can sign up for this, Reverend Bell or Dr. Kellogg. Where do they find the link to sign up for this? Do you know offhand? Do you recall?
The chamber website has the registration. I think we're putting out some information too through our communication part, but I know that I saw it on the chamber. Reverend Bell, do you recall? That's what you remember? Yeah.
And we're gonna put some out too as well.
We've got some information today. We're sending it out, and
thank you.
Yeah.
I just would encourage you to link into that 11:30 to 1 o'clock. Just a pretty powerful, I think, what can be a pretty powerful program. Reverend Bell said a few minutes ago, the SRO program is a part of the overall umbrella of the equity work that we're trying to do. I think this ties in very well with that, and I'm very honored to say that Reverend Bell will be on that, doing an introduction, I think, to a setup for Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech, I believe, correct? And Dr. Kellogg will be representing, kind of sharing what the school district is attempting to do, some of the direction that we're trying to go. So I'm sorry if that sounded like a commercial, because it was. It's very important work on Friday, August 28th.
We may want to add that a part of the agenda does involve a moderator and opportunity for community to present questions to the panel. So
thank you very much.
One-way presentation.
Yeah. Oh, great reminder. Yes, at the end of some of that presentation, there are some opportunities for question and response. Thank you very much. Vaughn, John, anything you would add to that? You feel good, okay, about that?
That's good.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for reminding me that it's August 28th, Reverend Bell, not April 28th. I appreciate that. You're always here to help. Friends, this has been a long meeting, but I think it is important for me to say I believe that it is important for us to look at all the programs that we do, and sometimes bringing somebody in from the outside to just kind of walk us through, help us identify the places where we're doing it well, the places where we may not be doing it well. So I would support a look at our SRO program. And I think Dr. Kellogg, maybe in board leadership, will talk about agendas down the next few and see where we can bring that in, see what we need to do there. Board, okay. Big thank yous to everybody. Everybody has said that, but it needs to be said many times. And I want to thank Ms. Marshall. Ms. Marshall, wasn't big agenda item tonight, but important agenda item tonight. And I want to thank Dr. Kellogg for his presentation. Both times were really good, and we appreciate everything that y'all have done. And my friends out there, I know some of the things we do disappoint you. Some of the choices and actions that we make, you wish we would make differently. I pledged when I ran 7 or so years ago, I would try to do the best job I knew how. And I continue to pledge that. We will make the best decisions we know how, and prayerfully, we will help this district be everything that it can be. So that being said, moving on, agenda item dates, location, times, locations. We will meet again, hybrid virtual meeting, 6 p.m. Monday, September 14, here at the Early Learning Center. That being said, if I may have a motion and a second to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you very much. Any other final words? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Mr. Bell,
Yes.
Dr. Nesterbaker,
Yes.
Ms. Altman,
Yes.
Ms. Davidson,
Yes.
Mr. Velardo.
I'm showing everybody the hammer. See the hammer? Yes, we are adjourned.